All right, so first step in this huge process, at least for me personally, is getting reference images and getting my block out nailed down. Um, Unfortunately, like a lot of hand painters, I am so god awful at concepting my own artwork. This creates a huge problem, obviously, in the game creation workflow when I'm the only artist on the team because it's like, oh god, I have to figure this out now. Um, but I opt to just take things that I can find online, like reference pictures or almost like kind of like a style guide that I see from other stylized works or like asset pieces, and I just put them all together in a big collage, and I use that to drive my main props in Maya. So um, I'm going to show you the whopping two pictures I got. I'm going for a wooden wheelbarrow that's going to be kind of seen in this overall graveyard. I'm probably going to butcher his name, but Tim Nidges does this like incredible hand painted stuff. So I definitely reference him a ton. But digressing, bigger point here is that we're going to focus on the series is this wheelbarrow. Now, I got the idea for the barrel itself because of my mispronunciation of wheelbarrow. I always say barrel. So I'm like, hey, you know what? We're a game about drinking and serving like grog and beer and that sort of thing. So like, why not just use a barrel that fits the whole theming of it? So this is kind of what I ended up coming up with. You'll see some parts on here are missing, like in terms of the symmetry and stuff, which I'll cover in a second. But essentially, I like to try and just block things out since I know that I'm going to take it right into ZBrush. Now, depending on the mood I'm in or the type of prop I'm working with or the day I'm having, I will just flip-flop between doing the low poly first and then doing the high poly. Sometimes I'll just straight up just make the final low poly and work within the bounds of that, which basically means that, okay, I'm happy with my low poly silhouette, I'd like to try and just get a high poly that I can bake into it without having to bring it back and do some retopo or decimate it in ZBrush. So in this case, as I've kind of progressed through my career, I realized I like to just get what I like to call I'd say like 80% of the way there. I'm really happy with how this turns out because it's going to be for VR, so it's going to be pretty low poly anyway. It's right around 668 triangles, and actually let me go ahead and take this outliner off the screen for right now. But essentially, I'm pretty happy with this. I know I'm going to basically work off the gist of this, and I even kind of cut in some notches since these can be kind of annoying to do in ZBrush, but the goal here is to work around this. So step number one is just to make sure all your meshes are manifold. That just means there's no holes in them. ZBrush doesn't like to try and figure out how to fill those holes using the Dynamesh feature. Sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't. I'd rather not play around with it. And I know that if I have some kind of prop that's going to be comprised of a lot of different pieces that make it up. So in this case, like the barrel is made up of a ton of different planks of wood. I like to break them down into separate meshes because that allows me to control what's going on in ZBrush a lot more than what's going on with just a giant prop. So, or a combined mesh, that is. I'm sorry. So I go ahead and I just get everything laid out. This is already a cleaned up version. I work very messy. I don't ever name things. I don't usually freeze transforms or history a whole lot. And then when I know I'm ready to bake everything, or I'm sorry, to take it into sculpting, I'll actually do my cleanup in the scene. Plus, I have to, present this nicely since I'm making a tutorial series out of this. So, so once you kind of have this whole thing figured out, I go in and I start naming everything. This is going to be a huge point in the entire series is making sure that your names are consistent. I don't always say consistent. They don't need to be great. They just need to be able to match a high poly suffix, because when we do our baking in Substance Painter, this is going to be a massive help to us, and we don't have to worry about just trying to make our mesh like perfect and match the high poly. And in this case, it just isolates all of the individual pieces and it just bakes them onto each of those meshes. At the end of the series, I'll do a little recap where I actually bring it back into Maya, combine everything, and then make it into the static mesh portions that it needs to be in, because of course you don't need to have all these separate meshes in the actual game. It's going to lead to a lot of performance hitting. So I just went ahead and broke all this down into their separate components, and I named them properly. Some things are a bit rudimentary at the moment, like this is literally just a cube. But again, this is kind of the reference photo, and I'm going for like the old like rickety rotten wood stuff. I love it. I think it kind of matches like the whole like rundown, poor. I'm just describing adjectives that I guess sum up Coffin Rot and what it's about. You takes place in this bar, and it's like really run down and it's awful, and your father had no money, and that's how everything is just so super shoddy and crappy looking, so it's all wood, right? So I want to keep that theme going, and that's where this like shoddy look comes in. So this works. I think this gets to the cross the the point for the most part. But the bigger thing to me right now is, I'm gonna make this a bit longer. The bigger thing to me is making sure that the silhouette is definitely there. It's a wheelbarrow. I mean, there's not much crazy stuff going on. I might end up, before I take it into ZBrush, I might end up adding a little cross brace right here. And on the reference photos, we got these. It just kind of helps break up that silhouette. But the goal here is to look at this and go, okay, that is a wheelbarrow. And I definitely am getting that vibe from it. So once I kind of get that silhouette established, I break it down a little bit, and I try to add some breakup to it, which is what you're seeing right here, like with these like wooden bars that get ripped off, that sort of thing. I actually might end up just duplicating this and flipping it to save on texture space, but I'll decide that at a later point in ZBrush. Let's see what else here. Oh yeah, so right here for these pieces that are kind of symmetrical, I don't even bother flipping them over. Like we have this this handle, we have a support rest where the wheelbarrow just kind of sits on the ground, and then I have this crossbar. Oops, sorry, and then I have this this like metal portion that you see right around here. It's kind of like this support. So I went ahead and just tossed that in here. I'm just going to mirror it over, especially because you're never going to see it really. Since you're in VR, you're only going to really be on this side of the barrel anyway, right? So I'll try to mirror a few pieces that, or a few parts of the texture that I know aren't going to see a whole lot of action. We'll see about the underside. Might do something with that. Maybe I can like mirror it across here and then just flip it around, but we'll see. Something you want to keep in mind too is, since we're hand painting, one of the big aspects of hand paint is baking your light, or essentially painting in your light, right? That's been a huge challenge for me when developing Coffin Rod, just because we're in virtual reality. 90% of the objects you're gonna see, if it's a good VR game, you can pick them up and rotate them and move them around. So I had to make a lot of tough design calls and basically deciding what needs to have the light painted in, and if it's a shadowed area, is it really super occluded or shadowed? And I ended up kind of settling with like mid-tone shadows and like just nice highlights to still make things have that traditional hand paint style that you see in like World of Warcraft or League of Legends, but that way it still kind of pays homage to VR, and it's able to be easily read and understood, because you don't want to bake lights too much in VR, since again, interactable objects. But that being that being said, sorry, I definitely ramble a lot. That being said, this top piece right here, if I were to mirror it, we want to be careful with the light, because if I end up painting like the inside of the wheelbarrow pretty well lit, because you can see it, and I just mirrored it all on the outside, it's going to look really goofy and it's going to look really strange, because you're going to have a ton of light information projected onto these planks as well. So we want to be careful with that as well. But that's something I'll decide kind of as I'm painting, because again, I'm going to probably take this back into Maya after I'm done and adjust the low poly for that last 20%. That way I can really match the high poly well, and I can also get my unwraps the way I want them to be. The way I used to work it, again, depending on the prop, I would actually just bring all this right into the like the unwrapper, but as you can see, it's just a bunch of like random stuff right now, so it doesn't really matter to me a whole lot at the moment. Otherwise, I think this is kind of about it for what I want to just cover right off the bat here. Oh, one last thing too is your details. Now let's talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary detail. This is going to change from artist to artist in my opinion, but essentially you want to try and break down your details into primary forms, which is kind of like that silhouette you're seeing right here. The barrel's a large detail, the wheel and the supports. You have secondary details, which are, I like to believe, kind of like these little braces that you see on the outside of a barrel, or this metal rung, because it's pretty large. And then you have your tertiary details, like the really finite details that almost kind of sell a story, like maybe the bends in the metal and how it's bowing, or maybe the metal like broke off a little lower, and I'm gonna maybe paint in like a darker spot right here where the band used to cover up the wood and it looks a bit darker because it didn't see a lot of light, that sort of thing. So you want to make sure you try and address those things now. Oh, good God, let's fix that. I like to try and address those things right now, just because it makes things easier for me in ZBrush, right? I don't have to worry about going in and inserting a bolt and then exporting it and retopoing it. And the reason I got a little finicky about that was because I'm using Maya LT, and there used to be an export limit or like an import limit or something like that with the triangle count, and so I didn't like to deal with going back and forth a whole lot. And it also just saves me time to, account for a detail and get it as close to finished as possible before I actually take it into sculpting, because it's just easier for me and it's how I like to work. I think it's always going to be easier to work with some kind of hard surface model like prop you have, rather than trying to create it from scratch in ZBrush. I'm sure other people will beg to differ, and that's cool. Whatever is your jam and whatever gets the details across and whatever sells the model in terms of its silhouette and its form, cool, go for it. But this is what I do. So I think that covers this. This is the first section. In the next part, I'm going to be introducing you guys, I'm going to be introducing the prop in ZBrush. I'm going to be getting it ready. Probably do a quick breakdown of what brushes I use and how I approach that. And I guess from there I'll maybe do a speed sculpt. I might do quick checkpoints. I don't know yet, but I'd like to maybe do a speed up version of it, just so you can kind of see my process behind it. The reason why I'm going into so much detail, by the way, about like this low poly and the high poly and the ZBrush sculpt is mainly because it's so important for getting the base for our hand paint, and you'll see why when I actually bring up a little add-on for Substance, or like a material set for Substance Painter called So Much Diffuse, or So Much Materials. I was specifically requested to do kind of help do a breakdown on that, and I figured like, hey, like why not show my workflow on that, right? So I'd like to really touch pretty heavily on that particular portion, but it all relies on your bakes. It relies on a clean bake. It relies on a good high poly, and we're not going to have a good high poly or a clean bake if we don't take the time to set it up the right way, which is why we have this nice breakdown of the mesh names here and the suffixes and the manifold meshes for sculpting on, and why we're going to really take our time to make sure like all the details can get transferred over okay. And I might even cover a really quick breakdown of unwrapping, because there is some pretty major stuff that I seem to have missed going through university, and definitely fixed recently, and it makes a world's difference on my bakes. So we'll cut this off here, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.